I flicked on Arsenal vs Newcastle on Monday night for some much needed light entertainment, and I was struck by how authoritative Rob Holding looked at the back for the Gunners. It's not the first time the 25-year-old former Bolton Wanderers centre-back has impressed me this season, even in an Arsenal team that made a fairly slow start to the campaign, and it got me thinking about some of the most improved players so far this season, in comparison to last. Whilst the premise is a pretty straightforward one, there is one point that I would like to make clear. Given the relatively short gap between the start of this season and the end of last season in most leagues, in comparison to the very lengthy gap between football being suspended and then restarting last season, it can be a bit difficult to differentiate between the two in your mind. A number of teams and players enjoy much improved form following football's restart and have just continued that form this season, but I'm primarily concerned with the most improved players this season from game week 1 onwards. It's also worth noting that every team on the planet has a player who has been greatly improved this season. An example from my own team Hull City would be George Honeyman, who has gone from being fairly passive in the Championship last season to being perhaps the most effective playmaker in League 1 this season. So, many greatly improved players have to miss out, although there will be some honourable mentions later on. Here are 7 of the most improved footballers so far this season. Davide Calabria. You do well to find a more improved team than AC Milan this season, certainly among Europe's elite, and there's no doubt in my mind that Davide Calabria has been the Rossoneri's most improved player this season. Whilst the 5-time European champions are flying high at the top of the Serie A table at this moment in time, it is worth pointing out that a number of the team's key players, such as Frank Kessier and Hakan Çalhanoğlu, belong to that group of players that I talked about in the introduction, whose form really picked up midway through last season. As any of you watch my short documentary video about AC Milan's rise, or simply follow Italian football will know, Stefano Pioli's side went on an extraordinary post-Christmas run from the start of 2020 onwards, and they have just carried that fine form into this season. Whilst Davide Calabria did improve towards the back end of last season, I suspect few at the San Siro expected the transformative improvements that we've seen so far this term. Born in Brescia, Calabria joined the AC Milan youth ranks at the age of 7. He broke into the first team squad in 2015, but found Italian international Matteo De Siglio occupying the team's right-back spot. In 2017, De Siglio departed, but fellow Italian international Andrea Conti arrived. It is only injuries to Conti that saw Calabria become a regular in Milan, but fans will be thankful that he is now, with the 24-year-old really having pushed on this season. Calabria is an attack-minded fullback who used to play midfield, and his athleticism and intent has seen him flourish in Stefano Pioli's side over the last few months. Marcus Yorente. From Serie A to La Liga, we come to another team, not just player, who have been resurgent this season. Atletico Madrid finished 17 points behind title winners Real Madrid last season, tied on points, with Sevilla in 4th place. This season, Diego Simeone's side look capable of running away with the La Liga title for only the 2nd time this millennium. They're 4 points clear at the top of the table at this moment in time, in addition to having 2 games in hand. Yes, barring a thrashing at the hands of Bayern Munich and a humiliating exit from the Copa del Rey, Atletico have been brilliant this season, and few players have impressed more than Marcus Llorente. The 25-year-old, who joined Atletico from Real in 2019, had a fairly quiet debut campaign at the Wanda Metropolitano, with the exception of his brace off the bench against Liverpool at Anfield in the Champions League. Only 16 of Llorente's 29 La Liga appearances were starts last season, with Simeone seemingly not fully trusting the midfielder just yet. Considered to be a suitable replacement for Rodri once the Spaniard had signed for Man City, Llorente had impressed in that role on loan at Alaves. Thought of being in a similar mould to a Casemiro or perhaps even a Sergio Busquets, it just never quite clicked for Llorente there, up until Diego Simeone decided to give him a run out as a number 10. Llorente has been superb this season in a position few expected him to ever occupy. He's already made 9 goal contributions from 12 starts so far this season, and he's gone from being viewed as a bit of a flop to perhaps the best midfielder in La Liga this season. Luke Shaw. I must admit that this one has come as a bit of a surprise to me. Not because I didn't think Luke Shaw was talented. If it wasn't for that awful injury against PSV a number of seasons ago, I suspect he'd have hit 30 caps for England by now, but because I saw few signs of such a dramatic resurgence last season. Yet again, Manchester United are another team who have been greatly improved this season compared to last, but no one more so than Shaw. Shaw has had so many false dawns at Old Trafford over the last 5 years, in addition to a number of occasions in which it looks certain that he would leave the club. Once the most expensive teenager in world football, Shaw turned 25 in July, and when Alex Telles joined Manchester United just a few months later, you could be forgiven for thinking that Shaw's spot in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side might have been lost. Sometimes it takes a bit of competition to put a rocket up a player though, and that seems to be exactly what has happened to Shaw. He has been a revelation this season, looking totally composed defensively and a constant presence on the left flank going forward. Shaw has been littered with praise since his impressive performance in a fairly drab Manchester derby, and rightly so, but the reality is that he has been just as impressive for almost all of this season. Hirving Lozano. I spoke a lot about Hirving, or Chucky Lozano, in the first 12 months of this channel's existence, between his arrival at PSV and his famous winning goal against Germany at the 2018 World Cup. The poster boy of Mexican football at this moment in time, I've always found Lozano to be great to watch, and felt that he was someone who could star in the Premier League without requiring a great deal of time to adjust. A fast and aggressive wide man who has quick feet and bags of invention, but is also willing to do the dirty work, chase long balls, and harass defenders, I thought Lozano's move to Napoli, even for €42.5 million, would turn out to be pretty decent business for the club. That certainly didn't appear to be the case last season, as Lozano suffered his first real challenging period of his professional career to date. Across the entire season, in which Lozano played 35 games but only started 10 games in the league, he could only manage 5 goals and 1 assist. He has already doubled his number of goal contributions from last season at the halfway stage this term, with 10 goals and 4 assists to his name. But more than the statistics, he has looked much more like his old self. He has looked more powerful, more confident, and much happier in his surroundings all round over the last few months, and he has become a key man in Gennaro Gattuso's side. Jack Grealish and Kylian Mbappe are the only players to have carried the ball into the box more times than Lozano in Europe's top 5 leagues so far this season, so the 25-year-old deserves his spot in my mind, even among a congested chasing pack. Joao Felix. The first player in this 7 who isn't 25 years old, which is just one of those unintentional quirks that occurs in these videos every now and then, Joao Felix is of course still only 21 years old. You might think that his improvement this season is just the natural improvement of a footballer who is still very young then, but I don't think it's as simple as that. Having looked like one of the brightest prospects in world football during his breakout campaign at Benfica, Felix secured a staggering £113 million move to Atletico Madrid in the summer of 2019. In his first season in Madrid, a number of people, including myself, felt that the move might have been an ill-advised one for both player and club. Felix is someone who flourishes with creative players around him, when he has plenty of green in front of him, and when he's given the license to roam around. None of those things are really synonymous with the Diego Simeone side, but we shouldn't forget what a remarkable record Atletico have when it comes to developing centre forwards. This season, it appears as though Felix could become the latest in that long line. He has been a new man in a fairly dominant Atletico team that could have had 3 or 4 players in this 7, and are the only team to have 2. He has 8 goal contributions from 9 starts in La Liga this season and has scored 3 and 6 in the Champions League. So, I offer my sincere apologies to both him and Atletico for ever having doubted them as a match made in heaven. Mourinho. The only inclusion in this 7 based outside of Europe, I'm sure many of you will be tuning into the final of the Copa Libertadores next week, which takes place on your favourite YouTuber's birthday. I'm sure you all have that day etched in your diaries, and if you are unfamiliar with Brazilian football, make sure to keep an eye on Mourinho. There is a stereotype surrounding Brazilian flair players and forwards that they start with a bang but tend to fade out young, whether it be through injuries, a love of partying, and oftentimes a combination of the two. And there is a certain degree of truth to that perception, and there are certainly no lack of high-profile examples. There are also a growing number of late bloomers within the Brazilian game, however, and Mourinho is chief among them. Uncapped at the age of 30, Mourinho has been bouncing around the Brazilian game and failing to really settle in anywhere for more than a decade. He joined Santos in May 2019 in a swap deal which saw centre-back David Braz head in the opposite direction. It would be fair to say that Santos got the better end of that deal. Fast, agile, and now absolutely devastating in the final third, Mourinho impressed in 2019, but this season has been a whole different kettle of fish. He is the second highest scorer in the Campeonato Brasileiro Serie A this season, trailing only Thiago Gallardo, a fellow uncapped 30-plus-year-old. Mourinho has made 21 goal contributions in 20 appearances for Santos in the league from the right flank, in addition to having helped fire his team into the Libertadores final. A stunning late bloomer, Mourinho would be in the Brazil squad by now if it wasn't for his age, of that I've no doubt. Honourable mentions. There are genuinely far too many honourable mentions that made my initial draft for this 7, almost all of whom would have been worthy inclusions, for me to possibly mention them all. From the Premier League alone, names like Che Adams, Fred, Michael Keane, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Rob Holding, Ilkay Gundogan, David De Gea, Pedro Neto, Serge Aurier and Mason Mount have all made huge strides this season, I feel, and a special honourable mention has to go to Tanguy Ndombele. Subscribers to this channel will know that I have long been a big admirer of the Frenchman, and though I could understand lots of the criticisms of him last season, especially given his price tag, I always thought he'd come good at Tottenham if given the necessary time. I won't let anyone forget the amount of mockery and abuse I received for stating that I still felt Ndombele was a better signing than Naby Keita, and with every passing game, I feel marginally more vindicated. Whilst Ndombele has no doubt improved greatly this season at Tottenham, I believe there is still an awful lot more still to come from him. I will add that the likes of Fred and Michael Keane had improved following Project Restart last season, which was one of the reasons why they didn't feature, and on the continent, very honourable mentions must go to the likes of Danilo, Adrien Rabiot, and Jonas Hoffmann, among others, although the player who actually came closest to featuring was probably Mario Hermosa. The centre-back has been superb for Atletico Madrid this season, and he primarily missed out because I didn't want a list of 7 to feature more than 2 Atletico Madrid players. Speaking of the top 7, we'll return to that now, and here is your top spot. John Stones. I'm sure plenty of you felt as though I might have forgotten about him in my honourable mentions there, but no, John Stones wasn't mentioned because he does in fact take top spot. In a world of meteoric rises all over the world of football this season, few have surprised me more, or been more impressive, than that of John Stones. Following the arrival of Ruben Dias at Manchester City, which always seemed to be the perfect signing for Pep Guardiola, it seemed obvious that Laporte and Dias would become the citizens' go-to centre-back partnership. Dias is a borderline world-class all-round centre-back who had arrived for a club record fee, meanwhile Laporte had arguably been second only to Virgil van Dijk, when fit, in terms of the Premier League's most impressive centre-backs in recent years. Having seemingly failed to establish himself on a number of occasions, I'm sure I wasn't alone in thinking that Stones' future lied as either being a backup or away from the Etihad altogether at the start of this season. In fact, I seem to recall that Pep Guardiola was happy for the Englishman to join Tottenham Hotspur on loan before a ball was kicked this season, only for Stones to turn the move down. He obviously felt he could force his way back into this Manchester City side, and whilst few would have believed him at that time, it is Stones who has been proved right during the first half of this season. A fantastic athlete and ball-playing centre-back, the only doubts surrounding Stones have always been his ability to cock up when it matters most. He's hardly put a foot wrong this season though, establishing himself in Pep Guardiola's starting 11, looking like one of the best defenders in the league, and even chipping in with a few goals in recent weeks. From being out in the wilderness only a few months ago, Stones now looks like England's best centre-back, and that is one hell of a turnaround. So that is it for today's video. Thank you all as ever for watching, and apologies if the player that you wanted to see featured didn't, especially if they didn't even get a mention. This was a ludicrously competitive 7, and consequently, as I said in the introduction, a number of greatly improved players missed out, both those who made my shortlist but just missed out, and those who I overlooked altogether, I've no doubt. Nonetheless, thank you all again for watching, give us a like if you enjoyed the video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. Oh, and you can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram, or both, via the username @HITC Sevens on both platforms, should you wish to do so.